Hello and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about July 21st. And July 21st, I know I said that yesterday, but I was just really tired, and it was like 1 or 2 a.m. and it was already July 21st where I am because I'm in the same time zone as Russia and Ukraine. So yeah, this time it's actually July 21st, so let's get right into the events today. And there wasn't much to talk about in terms of like positional fighting and such and strikes. Today was more tame in that regard. So I just wanted to have a more general conversation today. But in Kherson, we had Russia hit a depot with ammo in an eastern Mykolaiv suburb. So that's just standard by now. We all know that there's strikes on Mykolaiv. We also know that there's shelling of Mykolaiv. There was also shelling of Dnipro, Kryvyi, Nikopol, Zaporizhia. All these areas, we all know that already. The more important thing is that there was a report from Russia that says that 12 HIMARS were actually fired at the Antarovsky bridge, and all of them were intercepted. And this is not the first time that Antarovsky bridge has been attacked. Yesterday I talked about it, and it has been attacked now for the past 2 days, and there are more than 10 craters, I'm pretty sure, because I saw the video of this Russian convoy going through the bridge after the attacks. Pretty sure it was filmed today in the morning, and yeah, it was like damaged to a certain extent, but the fact that you had military vehicles going back and forth across the Dnieper River does show that it wasn't like a major setback for the Russians. Like they can just repair it, and that's it for Kherson. Because again, there wasn't a lot of fighting here today, just shelling stuff that we are all used to. Now I want to talk about this report from Rybar on Bakhmut, and basically what Rybar reported on. They talked about the coordinates of a lot of Ukrainian positions, and they were alleging that some of them were actually in civilian areas, and some of them were just in some standard areas, but it is still interesting to go over, so I'm going to look at the graphic that Rybar has, and of course, all credit goes to Rybar. They are very good with these insider reports, and I do trust them a lot. Of course, they have a Russian slant, so always take that into account when you're reading their stuff. But let's look at what they have here. So, basically, what they're showing here is that you have all of these uh like Ukrainian positions within certain areas that are some of them are like hospitals, for instance. Um I'm not sure if it's shown on this graphic, but there is a medical school that Rybar was talking about, and they were saying that there were there's ammo stored there, there's artillery stored there, troops in the area. And I'm not sure the exact location of that because I can't read Russian, but anyone who can, this is a very useful graphic. And it does talk about the like coordinates of a lot of these positions. I'm pretty sure that this one is an asphalt plant that I was reading about. And what they were saying is that a lot of military vehicles and ammo and stuff was stored in the like in the parking lot. And then you also had Ukraine firing from the roof, mortars and stuff like that. And of course, on the outskirts, there are a lot of Ukrainian forces, tanks, command posts, stuff like that. MLRS, all of that on the eastern outskirts of the city. And then, of course, within the city, especially in the more industrial area, since this part of the city is more of like this industrial area. So you had a lot of Ukrainian positions over there because it is farther away from the residential areas. But yeah, Rybar is alleging that they're using maybe not human shields, but they are using civilian targets or civilian infrastructure to house their troops or their or they have a presence of their military there. It's possible that those areas are evacuated, civilians evacuated from there already. And in that case, nobody would really be harmed by that besides the property itself. But we do know that there are about 350,000 civilians still in the Bakhmut, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk line, which is around like this is just a rough estimate of what Ukraine was talking about when they said this. I'm pretty sure they're talking about this area around here, something like this. I'm not sure if it includes some of these areas, but this is probably a rough estimate of what Ukraine is referring to when they say that 350,000 civilians are in this area, saying that it's 350. So just know that there are many civilians still in the area. Of course, most of them have already fled from the area as refugees or to the other parts of Ukraine. But yeah, you still have a lot of civilians there that are caught in the crossfire, unfortunately. And I just want to say one last thing about the asphalt plant that I was talking about, that there are M777 howitzers stationed there. And the M777 howitzers, they were like considered a super weapon beforehand, like maybe a month ago, or but more recently, people have just accepted the fact that a lot of these M777s have been actually captured by Russia, if not destroyed. So no, it's not much of a game changer. So it is still a pretty good like weapon for artillery and stuff like that. But no, it's not gonna. It hasn't changed the dynamics of the situation at all. Okay, so and I'm going to talk about Solidar and Seversk for a little bit. And in Solidar, we haven't seen much of a change in the fighting. Russia is sort of just continuing to make the gains that they were yesterday. They're trying to consolidate whatever minor gains they made and try to push ahead, but we have no confirmed success as of now. The one thing that was talked about a lot today was the fact that there was fighting in Novoluhansk over here, and that the power plant is still being heavily attacked. But no, there has been no progress in this area. We're also hearing of fighting in the vicinity of Mironivka, right here, which is people thought for a while was under Russian control. It still probably is, but the fact that there is fighting around there shows that, yeah, Ukraine has offered stiff resistance, and they won't be backing down as of now. But that's about it for this area of the fighting. There was nothing really to talk about in Seversk, honestly. Maybe I'll change the map a little bit based on the fires, but every single day the fires change. Like the one day you could have a fire in the like western part of Seversk, and then the next day you have one down here in the southern areas. It doesn't really mean much. You just have to get a general idea. You can't just specifically look at fires to tell you what's going on, because that doesn't necessarily mean that there are troops present in the area. Maybe it's just showing like shelling or fire spreading and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that there are like firefights going on there. So yeah, I won't be talking much about Seversk. I'm just gonna move on to Kharkiv, and in Kharkiv there was not much. The only thing to note is that in Potomnik there was a report from the Russians that there was fighting there. I'm not sure how true that is, but if it is, then I will change the map accordingly and I'll just show it as contested. Now, that's it for actual events on the front line. Now, I want to just have like this general discussion about some breaking news. So, first of all, we have a report from the CIA. The CIA, they're saying that Russia, their casualties in terms of deaths has been at 15,000 since the start of the war. And then the wounded number is about 3 times as much. So that would be 45,000 and then 15,000. So 60,000 casualties in total. And that's out of about 200,000 to 300,000 Russian and DPR, LPR troops. I don't know if this also counts the casualty numbers that CIA has. If they also have um, the DPR and LPR casualties, I think they probably do, but those numbers would also be sort of high because the DPR and the LPR have been at the forefront of a lot of this fighting. But also the CIA, they're obviously biased, so I really think that they would be inflating the numbers. And if they are, then that shows that the casualties that Russia does have are actually pretty low in comparison to Ukraine. And also, just remember the CIA. They do have some. They're very good at information collection. Obviously, that's probably the only thing they're that they're good at. So yeah, I would say that if they were telling the truth, then and if they were saying this in earnest, then I would 100% believe them. But since they are biased, we really don't know if this number is true. It probably is less if this is what the most pro-Ukraine source besides Ukraine itself is saying. And I just wanted to mention that in March and in like early February, not early February, late February, but these numbers were exponentially higher. You had reports saying 45,000 deaths for the Russians, 60,000. All these random numbers just being thrown out without any sources, without any sort of investigation, just randomly spewing these numbers that nobody actually believed besides the hardcore fans of Ukraine. But now we're seeing a backtracking where the CIA is starting to slowly admit that, yeah, they were probably wrong about this and that the numbers that Russia has actually suffered are lower. Although 15,000 is not a good number and 3 times as wounded, for 45,000 wounded, that is also not really good because that together, that's like, what, a quarter of their force, their fighting force. But the thing is, it really does depend. Like, if you're lightly wounded, you could probably get back into the fighting really quickly. So I don't know if all those deaths are irrecoverable. All those wounded are recoverable. But yeah, now I'm going to talk about the Polish intelligence on casualties and on the war in general. So in Poland, the intelligence agency is reporting that Ukraine's irrecoverable losses are amounting to 300 per day, and that's actually a pretty like low figure compared to others I've read, and that might just be because Poland is biased in favor of Ukraine. But 300 per day, that's still not good, and that's like the minimum. And they're saying that since the start of the war, 4,600 of Ukraine's best military personnel have been killed. So these include officers, like top generals, mercenaries, these sort of people. And because all of these officers are dying, these the heads of many of these units, they're actually being replaced with the nationalist units, the officers from the nationalist units. So I'm talking about groups like C-14, Dnipro Battalion, Kraken, Azov, all these different groups that are fighting, that were funded by Kolomoisky and the right sector people. Now you're seeing them trickle into the Ukrainian armed forces. They were already integrated, but now you're having them actually switch, like their officers switch into the units that are suffering heavy losses. So yeah, that's not a good look for Ukraine, but I understand it's necessary if they want to continue the war effort. So in addition, the United States and NATO actually have almost full control of the AFU's planning and conduct, which actually it makes sense because they're the main suppliers of the war, and I'm going to get into some specifics later on. and they actually are secretly in command posts on along the front line and deeper into Ukraine. You have a lot of people from CIA, MI6, NATO. All of them are actually present in Ukraine, guiding the war efforts. It's almost like they're co-combatants in everything, but actual men on the ground from these countries. That's the one difference. But besides that, yeah, these countries are directing Ukrainian intelligence. Zelensky, he just fired almost all of the. He fired his head prosecutor and a lot of the regional prosecutors, and they're in control of the military planning. The West, they're supplying the weaponry. So yeah, they have a huge sway over what Ukraine does. And according to this Polish intelligence, um, the West has been sort of pressuring Zelensky to hold the line around Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Toretsk until late August. So that's the line uh, over here. I'm just going to highlight it. This line over here. You see this? So, first of all, that means that there are several lines of defense that Ukrainians can fall back into. So first you have this line, the one that we're accustomed to, and then they can sort of go back to like right out of Seversk and into the center of Bakhmut, and then they could slowly sort of withdraw all the way back to the final line, which they want to hold out at if, until the end of summer, basically. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Toretsk. I think it's possible that they actually hold on until then, but after that, once Russia takes these areas, they're gonna steamroll through the rest of Donetsk, in my opinion. You're gonna see it go at a faster rate once they clear this area because the Ukrainians are gonna be so demoralized and they're gonna have lose so many troops in the defense of this line that Zelensky. He has this arbitrary date for holding back the Russians until the end of summer. That's going to go horribly, and unfortunately, a lot of people are going to die there, and then the remnants of that force are going to have to just fight it out for the rest of Donetsk. And I think it's going to go faster. You're going to see some more fast advances from Russia DPR forces, and then we're just going to see a new phase in the battles. But Ukraine does have a plan to sort of soften the blow of the casualties that they've been amassing. And that is, they are now being trained by NATO. 30,000 new um, conscripts probably are being trained by NATO, and they are expected to be sent to Donbass. And think of that, 30,000. That's a pretty large number in the context of this battle, because the on the Wikipedia page for the Battle of Donbass, they're saying 20,000 to 40,000 Ukrainian troops are participating. So you're basically doubling that number. So yeah, these are probably conscripts, and training from NATO might be effective in getting them to properly use NATO weaponry, because they use the Soviet ammunition, they use the Soviet weaponry, uh, and Ukraine has to totally adjust to this new modern weaponry from the US, from the UK, from France. So because of that, the only places where they can actually get Soviet weaponry is from Romania and Bulgaria. But yeah, I would prefer to be using Western, like from like top-notch NATO weaponry rather than antiquated Soviet weaponry. So I don't think they have any qualms with that. Now, the Poles, they're skeptical of the fact that four HIMARS systems are being shipped to Ukraine from the United States. They say it's possible, but they don't know if this will actually happen, because it would be a huge escalation between the U.S. and Russia, and it has already escalated to a pretty high rate by now. So what they're saying is that what will happen will be sending 50,000 artillery shells and hundreds of anti-tank weapons in the coming weeks. And coming weeks, who knows how long that will actually be. But in response to all this NATO weaponry that's coming in, we have been seeing a lot of backlash. So specifically, this Russian hacking group called Killnet is actually going to be preparing to hack Lockheed Martin's their corporation, and I'm interested to see what comes out of that because that's pretty funny. Um, but I also want to say that in Britain's aid package, it includes 20 150 millimeter M109 A4s, which are those are self-propelled howitzers, and then another 36 light 105 millimeter L119, and these are towed howitzers. And these are some of the like not they're not that good. These this equipment that Britain's sending them. I think the best like howitzers are like the M109s. Those are probably better than the L119s. But anyway, I want to mention that another thing that Poland has been talking about is the fact that they might be sending in 2 brigades to Western Ukraine just to like relieve the stress that Ukraine has had about their border with Belarus. They might be sent to the border with Belarus since Poland has experience with bordering Belarus, and then so just like the rest of Ukraine in general around here, because of course you do need soldiers in the interior of the country to keep order in case there's civil unrest, especially now, and to respond to threats from Russian airstrikes and stuff like that. So it will relieve a lot of pressure if Poland does go through with sending these forces, and the forces that they are planning to send, they will come probably by like August or so. That's the plan, according to the Polish intelligence, and this is a pretty big deal, but we'll see if it's in time. If basically the plan is to hold back the Russians in Kramatorsk, Toretsk, and then have the Poles come in, and then they can send their 30,000 additional conscripts plus the reserves that are stationed in Western Ukraine, then yeah, that could extend the battles in Donbass even longer, which of course that would be a pretty big deal. But yeah, let's move on now. So in regards to the situation with gas and sanctions, Nord Stream 1 has actually resumed its supply of gas to Europe, and that includes Germany, which I was talking about before, and all these other European countries that are suffering right now from the blowback to their sanctions. So this is good news for Germany because they were in complete panic mode after the announcement that Gazprom would no longer supply them, and that was due to some like turbine malfunction that Russia was refusing to fix. But now the Gazprom will continue shipping oil, so that's good news. But we're also seeing that the EU prevented action against an Airbus supplier, which is the name of this company. It's a Russian company. It's VSMPO, and the reason they're important is because they give titanium to the world's largest jet maker. So they are actually very important for like the commercial jet industry. So that's interesting. A lot of exceptions to these sanctions because the EU recognizes how much of a blow in the back. Uh, it's basically been it's been a backfire effect, and now they're starting to realize that, and they're going to start rolling back some sanctions, but they will keep some. And of course, there are loopholes that I've talked about before. But besides that, we're actually seeing like this bifurcation in terms of the markets of the West and of the East, as we've seen with the relations between Russia and Iran, with Putin visiting Iran and talks about potentially Iran giving Russia some drones. and they signed a 40 billion uh, economic deal. So you are seeing this sort of like the creation of this multipolar world between between the West and NATO and all of those people, and the Eastern axis of resistance to the current world order with United States, UK, all of those countries, and the a big example of this is that Iran and Argentina, they're going to be joining BRICS. Right now it's being finalized, and when that does happen, it's gonna be a pretty big deal because it would be like the antithesis to the G7 conferences that occur all the time, and you will see a strengthening of economic ties between these countries like China, and especially now you're going to see the South American countries like Brazil and Argentina. They're going to be shifting away from U.S. influence. That's going to be a big deal, and it is basically like a second Cold War. But now it's um, the dynamics have changed because the Soviet Union is not the only because in the Cold War, you had just the two main powers, but now we're seeing multiple powers. So that's interesting, and it also has the potential for a much more deadly conflict than we saw in World War II, especially if nukes are utilized. I don't want to get to that point. I don't think anybody does. But that's it for today, and see you tomorrow.